Yo, what's going on, everybody? What is going on? Welcome back. 2024, we're in the building, and we've got UFC Vegas 84 to break down. We've got Bets and Banter back in our lives. We've got a brand new studio as well. Still a work in progress, but we're coming along. We got the posters, we got the decorations, we got the books. So we're excited to get back down to breaking down fights, and we've got 12 great fights to break down. We've got a brand new friend of the show as well, with whom we're going to be doing it. So without further ado, welcome to the show, MMA PropAholic. How are you, my brother?
I'm doing good, Liam. I'm very happy to be on the show. First time being on the show, and I'm excited to break down fights, man. I've been waiting the whole month for fights. I felt like I was missing something in my life, and fights were definitely it. So I can't wait to get into it. I can't wait to have a great year with all of you, and let's make some money this year.
Absolutely, brother. And honestly, because of the way that the UFC schedule has changed over time, we've gotten to the point where it's like week after week after week. And I almost welcome the break. I get to the point where I go so deep on some of these fights. I was fried mentally. I was like, man, I need a break. And so I took a little time off from watching fights, and I feel refreshed. I feel ready to go. And I felt like I was getting clearer reads as I was doing some of these fight tape studies, which is something that at the end of the year, I just wasn't feeling that way. You know, it almost starts to all blend together. And now I feel like I'm coming at it with a fresh mind and a fresh headspace. So without further ado, guys, let's start as we always do on Bets and Banter from the bottom of the card and work our way on up. We're going Tapology order, of course. And we've got a fascinating fight, in my opinion, to start with. We've got Felipe Bunes taking on Joshua Van. And Joshua Van, talk of the town in recent months in this flyweight division, right? He's a guy that's saying, I want to be ranked in this division soon. I'm 22 years of age. I don't care about that. I'm ready to go right now out of the box. And the skills seem to line up. You know, the attitude, the winning, the willingness all seems to add up. But the experience is maybe not quite there. He's a little bit of a younger guy in this division. Same thing with the grappling experience, right? Blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Does that mean he doesn't have real skills? No. But does that mean that he's, still young in his journey? I'm a blue belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've been doing it for, 3-4 years. That's sometimes the way that it is, right? And so I think of a guy like Josh Van, very talented, projects really high, but he went from being plus 180 in that UFC debut to being a minus 200 favorite his next fight. I think part of that was a real adjustment. Like, man, we got this guy wrong. But I also think a little bit of that is recency bias, right? Somebody gets a win as an underdog, people will then flock to them their next fight. He did face a little bit of adversity early against Borjas. Borjas landed some clean shots. I bet Borjas in that spot, thinking, hey, this is a little bit of line regression. By the way, I bet Josh Van the first time he debuted in the UFC, I thought that was a good spot at plus 180. So trying to bet the underdog read on Josh Van, it worked out once, didn't work out when I tried to fade him. Now he's back entrenched in that favorite position, and he's taking on a opponent here in Felipe Bunes, who the UFC has been looking at for a long time. How do we know that? He's had a bunch of canceled fights, right? He's had some fights that fell through, but he clearly has fought a high level of competition outside of the UFC. So he's a tough guy, a little bit older to be coming into the UFC, to be getting signed, but he kind of has some of those assets that maybe Van doesn't have, right? We talk about the grappling experience. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, spent a lot of time on the mat. That seems to be his primary focus. Recently, he's been getting these knockouts on the feet. He's been trading a lot more with guys. You look at his historical tape, he's constantly in wrestling, grappling affairs, heavy on his attacks from the guard. So I think of a guy like Buenos as a little bit of a wild card here. I think he could come in and surprise people in this spot. I think he does fit the category of a live enough underdog in some ways, but I also think of a guy as in Van as projecting high in the division. I think he's a good fighter. I think he's a talented guy. I just think that there's a little bit more I want to know about him in terms of how he deals with a wrestling and grappling approach before I feel comfortable at this number. But I also think if this fight just plays out on the feet, I think Van can deal longer in the pocket. I think he throws a little bit, more violent combinations. And I think Bunes is dangerous there, but I also think he's a little bit more susceptible to being hit and clipped there. So for me, it feels like Van should get the job done if it's a fight that primarily plays out on the feet. But I think that if he starts to mix in the takedowns, if he starts to, rely on that element of his game, could get very tricky. How do you feel about this fight, my brother? Do you feel like there's any betting value to be had?
Yeah, so I actually have like two sprinkle bets on this fight. I have Josh Van to win in round two at plus 600 on Bet Rivers for just a quarter unit, and Van to win in round three for another quarter unit at plus 850 on Bet Rivers. I just feel like Bunes doesn't really throw too much high volume. I feel like he's going to be really relying on the grappling, trying to hold Van up against the fence, because Van just has like such good movement. throws very good inside leg kicks, works the body very well with his hands. I mean, just watch the Borjas fight. I was there live, and he just absolutely broke Borjas down. He ate a lot of heavy shots at first, but I mean, credits to Borjas because he is very durable and to eat those shots. I don't really feel like Bunes is going to be able to eat those shots. And the fight that just really stuck out to me for Bunes was against Cruz. Like, I think Cruz was like, Oscar Cruz was like, 38 at the time, and he didn't really throw a lot of volume in that fight. He was kind of just waiting for Cruz to come at him, and like, I just feel like Van is just very tough. He's young, he's gritty. Yes, he's a blue belt in jiu-jitsu. His jiu-jitsu really hasn't like been tested. It's going to get tested here against Bunes, who literally, like, I think his 3 losses at one point, 3 losses in a row were like a combined record of his opponents were 25-1. So this guy really does have like pretty good experience. He's a pretty good grappler, but I just feel like round 2, Van's going to put it on him. And round 3, I feel like Van can honestly get him out of there. So I'm picking Van to win in the 3rd round by knockout. But Felipe is a pretty live dog, I think, at like, plus 225 now. I do think Van at minus 200 was a good parlay piece. I actually parlayed Van with Jamal Emmers on that last card that Van fought on, and I was sweating in the 1st round because I know Van was like plus 130 going into the 2nd. He just broke him down. So, yeah, I like Van here. I think he's the way better striker, and I feel like he's going to break this guy down, man.
I should have arbed off live. I wasn't paying attention to the live market there, and so I sat with my Borjas plus 200 feeling pretty good going into round 2, and then it all went sideways so fast. But I knew it could. The thing about Borjas is I wasn't sold like he's the second coming. I just was like, this guy's really tough. He doesn't look like he's going to quit on me, and I feel like he's going to go out there and fight hard for my dollar. All that was true, but Josh Van just way better, right? Like, the longer the fight goes, sometimes you get to discover like who's really deeper with their skill set. And I think that's what we learned there, is that Josh Van had more layers to go to, especially on the feet. And Borjas was a little bit more limited, didn't have any answers to the body work, like you mentioned. So I think that in this spot, Bunes is probably as good as he's going to get, and I do think his striking's made some improvements over time, but I agree with you. If he was to lose this fight, the way I envision him losing it, especially inside the distance, would be him getting finished later on, right? I think in the 1st round, it's probably going to be his best work. I think that Bunes is going to come out here like a bat out of hell because he's been waiting for this opportunity in the UFC. And the other thing is, when you've got a young kid that is going to be difficult to beat, you don't want to give him a chance to start getting rolling and get some momentum. I think that it's probably a spot where Bunes is going to try and jump on him early, get him in some dangerous grappling situations, put some doubt in his mind. And I think that's his path to winning this fight. So, if you like the Van side and like you mentioned, you didn't get in early, then maybe waiting now and seeing, hey, could I get Van down around plus 130, in this opportunity? I think that would be a great way to look to bet him if you miss the early numbers. But with that being said, let's move along to the next fight where we've got Tom Nolan taking on Nikolas Motta. And I'm going to let you kick off the breakdowns on this fight. But what I want to say as we do is that I tweeted out earlier a video of this, so you guys can check it out for yourself. But one thing I always talk about from a gambling theory standpoint is when you're betting on big favorites, it's about confidence intervals. It's about how sure am I that they're going to do everything I need them to do to not fumble this bag, right? They're not going to make a mistake that's going to cost them the fight. They're not going to do something stupid. For example, I always say, if somebody's just going to go out there and strike, even if they're really good at it, that's going to be inviting some volatility. Whereas if somebody's going to go out there, get takedowns, hold the fight down from top position, it's like, unless the other person's going to armbar them from the guard, that's a pretty, seamless way to avoid variance, right? So when I'm looking at a fight like this, I say to myself, Tom Nolan, should he be favored here? Absolutely, 100%. And is he the more talented guy on paper? I think there's no doubt about it. But when you look at the confidence intervals for a guy that's not that experienced, that's making a debut, and that also could have been disqualified on the regional scene against a much lower level fighter for a knee to a downed opponent, does give me just a touch of pause here with Tom Nolan. But I think, like I mentioned, definitely has the talent to project higher. So what is your thoughts about this fight, my man? And we got another big favorite here in this matchup.
Yeah, so I do like Nolan in this fight, but I mean, I think his line is ridiculous now. I actually got in on the under 1.5 at opening odds at plus 125. Line's now minus 220. So I know some people in the Discord were able to get on that. Just put a unit on it to win 1.25 units back. I mean, I just think Nolan's honestly going to knock this guy out in the 1st round. I thought the fight against Ogden was just a really bad look. I know Ogden has really good fight IQ, and I know he's like a coach in his corner too. But he was just jabbing him up the whole fight. And I didn't really like how Motta was reacting to those punches. And if you just look closely, I think Ogden actually kind of dropped him, and Ogden wasn't even like following up on any shots, as like Tom Nolan is literally going to be fighting with reach, and he just like has nonstop pressure. But like, I mean, Nikolas Motta, he does have pretty good power. He's very stationary on his feet. He doesn't really throw a lot of kicks. He doesn't check any light kicks either at all. But I don't feel like Nolan's going to stand on the outside with him. Like on height and reach wise, like Nolan's kind of reminded me of Jalen Turner in the way he like has reach, and I just think Nolan is really powerful. But like as you said, Liam, I mean, that knee that he did on the ground, that illegal opponent when he knocked him down twice, it just kind of shows that this guy's really aggressive. He kind of like loses control of himself a little bit, and if he plays with fire too much, like Motta's not that bad. Like Motta can strike. Like he has a pretty good right hand, and like I know Manuel Torres like hit him with an elbow from hell, but like Motta was hitting Manuel Torres up for like a pretty good minute as well. So I really like the under 1.5. I mean, it's kind of gone now. Maybe like fight doesn't start round 2 as a parlay piece, but like I think Nolan's gonna cruise here. But like I feel like this fight doesn't really have a lot of betting value on it anymore, unless you guys got the under 1.5. Like even below like minus 160 range, I think was a great line too. But yeah, I love violence here, and I think Nolan's gonna spark Motta in the first round.
You know, man, we tend to agree on this one, right? And I always like to give the counter narrative. I like to steel man the other side, because when you're talking about like betting on a huge chalked favorite, right? That's what it's got to be. You have to deal with, hey, these are the ways this could go wrong, because otherwise you're not taking the process serious. And when I'm looking at this fight, I think that the way that Tom Nolan loses his fight is by making a really dumb mistake, right? A categorical error, or by getting caught on the feet. Like those are the two ways I see him losing this fight. I think Motta is a 0 on the ground. No disrespect. I just don't see him having any offense, right? You look at his historical record, doesn't show any offense there. So it's mostly defensive, and it's not very good, even defensively. So then you look at like, okay, what does he offer on the feet? Like a 50-50 exchange at best most of the time. He's kind of just a wild, reckless brawler. His chin's not that good, and his volume isn't that good. So it's like, I think Nolan's going to throw more. I think he's the better, more aggressive guy. And I think that he's making more improvements. When you look at a lot of these fights, he's had opportunities to submit these guys and just kind of not taking them always, but sometimes he looks for them. And I do think like Motta's a guy that hasn't been submitted that many times, but when you get rocked as frequently as Motta, anything's possible, right? And I just think that when I'm looking for betting value, I'm always looking for undervalued sub props. I think of Tom Nolan with his limbs, with his length. Who did you compare him to? Jalen Turner, the king of the club and sub, right? How many guys that Jalen Turner has submitted were already unconscious, right? But it doesn't matter. I'm cool with it, right? He's cashed me plus 900s, plus 700s in this exact kind of scenario against Brad Riddell. Small guy, wants to go out there and strike. What happens? Gets hurt in the early exchange. Then Brad Riddell's shooting takedowns. It's like, if Motta's shooting takedowns here, I think he's getting submitted, period. Like, I just think that when you look at how Nolan reacts, sprawl front headlock, and he's either punching or he's going right to that front choke series. So yeah, I see submissions on the amateur scene, and I also see some of the right instincts, and I see a guy in Motta who I rate as a 0 on the ground. So for me, this is the kind of guy in Nolan who I think has a much brighter future. And I just don't see Motta even having, 5 more UFC fights personally. But that's the way I see this one, man. I'm agreeing with you. I think Tom Nolan gets the job done here. But I love your spot on the under. I mean, clear CLV spot, and also just invites that volatility. Hey, if this guy makes a categorical mistake, most of the time when we see that, it happens in the early going. We saw another example of that with the guys who are fighting in the main event, right? Ankalaev, Johnny Walker. How did we see that fight go awry? Need to a grounded opponent. How did we see, the Jan and Aljo fight go awry? Knee to a grounded opponent. It's like the most common way. Weidman and Musasi, right? So just countless examples in UFC history of fights just being stopped from the knee to a grounded opponent, whether it comes to a conclusion or not. So that's just something to be a little weary of here with Nolan, because we've literally seen it on the tape. But with that being said, let's move to the next fight here. Talking about big favorites, my guy. We've got Gene Silva here, clocking in as the biggest favorite on the fight card, minus 1,000 on some of these sports books. Minus 800 looks like the best available price in the market here. And I'm looking at this guy, Gene Silva, coming out of a camp that I love, right? Fight Nerds. I like to consider myself a bit of a fighting nerd, right? I'm not from Brazil. I don't train with Caio and the boys, but I like how they approach the game, and I look at Gene Silva as nothing like Caio Barajo, right? He invites a lot more violence on the feet. He does have some semblance of a ground game, but certainly a lot more of a guy that's going out there to operate, looking for the knockout, looking to be violent on the feet. And we saw that on Contender Series as well. I'm thinking of this fight as, Westin Wilson, really awkward guy to get a read on. He doesn't look like much of a professional athlete to me. I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but just like if you were like picking, line up all the athletes in the UFC in rank order of athleticism, I don't think he's going to be near the front of that line, right? I think he's going to be well towards the back of that line.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, like, you look at a guy like Gene Silva, and he's probably going to be mid-tier at worst, right? Like, he just seems like a guy who projects a lot more powerful, a lot more fast and dynamic. So Wilson probably a little bit better, with the kicking technique and a little bit of finesse and stuff, but I just don't really see his game being very functional at the UFC level. So many losses coming in as well. And the fact that he got finished by Joanderson Brito, I'm not holding that against you, right? Like, I think a lot of guys get finished against Joanderson Brito, a lot better fighters than him. But the way that it happens, the lack of the physicality, the way he's getting horsed around so easily, I just don't think those things are good signs for him moving forward. But the only thing I will say to his credit is that he just has a really long, awkward body. And like, when we always talk about confidence intervals, right? On a favorite, minus 1,000, it's like, this guy can't make any mistake. He stubs his toe, you're an idiot. It's like, so I think of Gene Silva as a guy, probably not going to be minus 1,000 ever again in the UFC if he fights, 10 more times. So maybe, but it just doesn't feel like a fight that I can really get on board with the pricing. I understand why they're doing it, right? They don't want to write a million bets on Gene Silva, but it seems like they've priced it prohibitively, and I just have to react accordingly. How do you feel, brother?
Yeah, so I mean, Gene Silva at minus 1,100 is just, I think, is craziness. I do think he packs a lot of punching power, but like what I really see on his record is that he only has 2 submissions. And Wilson's been submitted 4 times. And like when you watch Silva, like he literally will pull guard up against the fence when they're grappling, and he will pull for a guillotine. And he goes all out for the guillotine as well. Like honestly, kind of reminds me a little bit of Cody Brundage a little bit. Like he will literally just pull guard anywhere and go for the guillotine. But yeah, like I know Westin Wilson, like as you were kind of mentioning with Motta, like I feel like his hands are just down, man. I mean, like they say on his film he fights like Wonder Boy, and those announcers just need to shut up because don't ever compare Westin Wilson to Wonderboy Thompson. Maybe the fight styles, but please don't put them in the same sentence together. Wilson just doesn't have a good chin at all. But like if you watch the Brito fight, like he did have Brito in a heel hook, like in a really deep knee bar, I'm pretty sure. And Brito was able to sprawl out of it and just land like 3 punches, and that was it for Wilson. But it really does show that Wilson will like try to get you to the ground, and he will try to submit you. I don't think his ground game is terrible. I'm pretty sure he is a black belt, but he does make mistakes down there. I mean, he's been submitted 4 times and he's been knocked out twice. One to be in ground and pound, and I think one was to when he got knocked out by a clean left hand. I'm pretty sure on the regionals. I thought that was a pretty bad look, but the guy he did get knocked out against does have 10 knockouts. I'm pretty sure like 11 wins. So I don't know if I can really give him too much shit about getting knocked out like that. But I mean,
former UFC
he has really bad striking
well.
defense. Yeah, but I like the fight to end by submission, Liam. I mean, I took it at plus 270 on Bet Rivers. Like, I just feel like if Silva's going to crack him, Wilson's going to try to grapple him, and that's when Silva could really pull for the guillotine. And I mean, Silva's going to unload on him. He's going to throw a lot of wide punches early. He's going to try to circle him up against the fence, try to throw hooks, try to throw uppercuts, overhands. And I feel like Wilson can try to get him down. So I feel like, and if you watch like on the regional scene, like Silva did have his back taken in one of the fights, and he almost did get submitted in a rear naked choke. So I thought like that was pretty eye-opener as well. And I just don't see any punch power from Wilson at all. With the fight doesn't go being minus 1,000, which I feel like someone can get submitted in this fight. I like it. And even like if you want to get fun with it, throw Westin Wilson by submission in round 1 at plus 2,800. Because I just think that's a ridiculous line. If he's almost knee barring Joanderson Brito, why can't he knee bar Gene Silva at minus 1,100? And I just feel like the line's off on the fight doesn't go, obviously. I feel like the fight to end by sub is just the best value on this fight. Like, Silva by submission's plus 350, but I just wanted to pay less down 80 cents, just God forbid, in case Silva really does submit him, because I've seen Silva have his back taken before, and he does get cocky. He talks, and he wants to throw down with you. So, yeah, I put half a unit on it to win 1.35 units, and I like the spot at plus 270 here. Just a small little half unit bet for me here.
Dude, you're talking my language right now. That's the exact kind of bet that I look for. The ends buy. And I think it's like one of the most underutilized markets, right? Like if
Yeah.
I think that we're going to be grappling, right, which is the predicate for somebody to get a submission more often than not, then I think the ends buy is probably going to hold some value. Not every time, but most of the time. And especially if I'm looking to bet the favorite, right? Like if I like the favorite, then I'm going to look at the ends buy method and see, is it a substantial difference? Because to your point, the best available price is plus 350 on this guy, Gene Silva by sub. So if you have an available plus 270, like, would you not sacrifice 70 cents so you're not crying in your coffee if Westin Wilson somehow ends up on this guy's back? Because the truth is, like, we know that Gene Silva can have guys end up on his back. To your point, we've seen that in evidence. Have we seen Westin Wilson submit guys from the back? Yeah. Like that's like how he wins by submission more often than not is getting on somebody's back. He's a long, gangly guy. And if any of you guys have ever grappled before, they could be a troublesome guy. Like, it's no problem if you're on top of them, if you're, dealing with the pressure like that, if you're holding them down. But when they're on top of you, now you just got a lot of stuff to deal with. They could start wrapping things up. And that's what I've seen from Westin Wilson. He's a pretty good hand fighter from the back. So, he's got a lot of negative skills, right? He's got a lot of things that are going against him here for sure. But I think that those are some of the plus level skills. And I like the way you're looking at this, man. Little contrarian, and also just gets you a lot of win equity for both guys. A guy that's been submitted 4 times. I mean, sometimes I talk about the fact that losing is pathological, right? I'd rather get submitted than get knocked out brutally like I did against Joe Anderson Brito. So here's my arm in my head. Just get me out of here. That's sometimes the way it goes. And I think that we could definitely see that kind of finish in this fight. So love your look there. And if the number hasn't gotten crushed, then I might even look to get it on that look myself. So good spot. Good spot. Next up, my man, we've got a great fight here. And I pointed this one out a couple weeks back, because I looked ahead at this card and I was like, man, it's not the best offering the UFC's ever put together, but this is one that just jumps off the page on the prelims, right? You got 11-0 Farid Basharat, 19-3 Taylor Lapilus. That's 2 great records, 2 guys that are only 4 fights deep on this UFC card. So for me, this is the featured prelim in my book of the evening. And I think that these are both really talented guys. How do you feel about this fight? We'll kick it to you first, brother.
Yeah, I really like this fight. It's great matchmaking by the UFC. I know Lapilus has been a pretty big dog this week. I just like Basharat in this fight, and here's why. Like, I feel like Basharat could kind of match the striking, especially at the kickboxing range for just like a portion of the round. I feel like that's where he's gonna like mix in the grappling. And I feel like what's like Lapilus really hasn't seen is like the inside and outside leg trips. Like if you watch Basharat, that's how he's really getting his opponents down. It's not really like double leg open mat wrestling. Like he gets you in the clinch and then he's able to get you down with the inside and outside leg trips. And his top pressure is ridiculous. I mean, he just like really is just consistently elbowing you, putting all his strength and shoulder pressure on you. And I cashed on him last time, the Basharat submission against Rodriguez at plus 400. Thought that was a great spot. I didn't think he was going to finish Rodriguez that quick, but he made it look really easy. I just feel like Lapilus' like ground game hasn't really been too tested. I feel like I understand like Basharat's not really like the best jiu-jitsu person, but he really does have mean elbows. Like go watch the Contender Series, man. He just absolutely tortured that dude. He got knocked down, I'm pretty sure, on the regional scenes too. I'm pretty sure it was against like some Ukrainian dude that Basharat got like really cracked against. But like Lapilus is a pretty high level striker. I didn't really like his last outing. He got his back taken in that fight as well, but the guy overcommitted the back and then fell on top of him. I don't feel like Basharat's going to rush position here. I feel like when he gets on top, he's going to do a lot of damage. He's probably going to ride out the round for sure. But I kind of like Basharat round 3 decision. I don't know what the line is, but I just feel like he's not going to finish Lapilus in the first couple of rounds. I feel like it's going to be a close fight. Could be neck and neck. But I just feel like the grappling edge here is going to be the huge decider here. So, yeah, I like Basharat by decision. But the best bet that I can give, and I might be getting to, is that round 3/decision prop on Basharat.
Fair play, my man. I do not think that's a bad look at all. If there was a finish that happened before the 3rd round, I would definitely be looking at the submission, for Basharat. And the reason I say that is I just think the goods on top. I really like what I've seen from him in terms of his ground game. Now, the things that I saw that might be, let's say, mildly concerning, Damon Blackshear was able to regard a number of times, and Damon is a good grappler, right? Like let's no two ways about it, right? Damon was able to get on top of him at one point as well, got the takedown. But you saw Basharat, not a one-trick pony, was able to work his way back up from his feet, was able to get the takedowns again in round 2, round 3. And to your point, has multiple takedowns that he can go to. Not really a power wrestler, I would say, but a guy that can go to some finesse stuff, right? He gets the crackdown position in a couple of his fights. He's gotten that single leg run the pipe. So I think that he does a lot of things right with the wrestling, but I think most especially it's just the way that he floats on top. There's a lot of times, especially early in that fight with Blackshear, that he was passing, that he was looking really good. And I think later on in the fight, he kind of got a little more conservative because he was like, man, I did not want to lose position here. This guy got on top of me before. And Blackshear is just that good, right? He's just that good in the grappling phase where Basharat likes to leverage himself on his opponent. So I think that they competed neck and neck on the feet, but Basharat shows he's a fight manager, right? He knows what to do to win the round, to take back over. All right, I lost this portion of the round. How do I win it now with 2 minutes left? Get on top, dominate the round, hold the position, be more effective with my ground and pound. It sounds silly. Like he's making that, hey, these are impactful. I'm really throwing everything into these shots, like subtle things that people don't think about that make a big difference. My old wrestling coach used to say it's the little things that make a big difference. Oh, yes, it is. How did he win that round? It was, hey, I was on top for 2 minutes. He was on top for 2 minutes. Why did he win? He was on top when it mattered at the end. He was on top going, and throwing hard shots. So that's going to sway the judges, whereas Blackshear getting on top and doing some decent work and trying to take him down, it's just not going to sell you as much. So I think that we saw Basharat in that fight in a real test, show his mettle, show what he could do. And against Lapilus here, it's a real style contrast. I think both guys are talented. I think both guys have real skills. And if it does play out purely on the feet, Lapilus is going to look like the side, in my opinion. I don't think that Basharat can compete with him for the full 15 minutes if it's purely a striking affair, just because I think he kind of gets down on himself. When it's just on the feet, when he's just striking, I have seen moments of lapse from him where he's like shelling up a little bit, backing up a little bit. But when he can work in his wrestling in his top game, he just looks like $1 million. And you pointed it out against Clayton Rodriguez. I said before that fight that I believe the UFC was punishing Clayton for missing weight. A lot of people have come around to that now, but I said at the time, I was like, they're punishing him for missing weight. They're saying, hey, you want to miss weight and be a big guy? Okay. Because he messed up the Tyra experiment. You can't do that. So when you do that, you're then getting a Basharat brother up at 135 and he got, killed, right? I think this is a fight where Lapilus last time out, big spot, hometown, kind of puts on a stinker, close enough fight. Callan Loughran, Irish, gave him the fingers, whatever. That's the opportunity to go out there and knock him out and make yourself a French MMA legend. Instead, you eke out the close decision. Callan Loughran just gets to live to fight another day. There was no resolution there. This is a conflict resolution business. He didn't really give that resolution. And I think now the UFC saying, hey, you could have been on one track. Now you're on a different track. This is the hard track. You want to be a guy here? All right, go out there and show you can defend the takedowns against this guy now. And I think it's a much harder ordeal. And I think the consequences of getting taken down are a lot more serious. Callan Loughran, my Irish brother, right? Want to put on for this guy. But he's still a work in progress. He's still a guy that's putting his game together. He's a guy that's fresh off the regional scene, doing well with the takedowns and the grappling. That's a whole different ballgame. That's a whole different level. Whereas this guy, Farid, has been doing it at the UFC level, and he's been doing a great job. So I think that Farid, with the guys he's training with in Vegas, with the fact situationally it's at the Apex, right? Home match for our guy who's training out in Vegas. Him and his brother, they've been students of the sport. They've been at London Shoot Fighters. They've been here, there, and everywhere, getting the best looks with the best guys. And I've said, if you're training at 135 right now, the contingencies are in Las Vegas, they're in Arizona, but you could point to them on a map, where are the hotbeds in the sport right now? And right now in Las Vegas, a lot of the best bantamweights in the world, the Patchy Mixes of the world, the Aljamain Sterlings of the world, and these Basharat brothers, among a number of others, Manel Cap at 125, a lot of these guys passing through Extreme Couture, 10th Planet Vegas, and all these other hotbeds, Syndicate, and a lot of other hotbeds in the region. So I'm thinking this is a Basharat spot. I think he's going to get the win here, but I think he's going to have to earn it. So to your point, I'm seeing, maybe round 2 or 3, he gets that submission, or he's able to just ride out some top time, get the decision here, another hard fought win. But Blackshear has grappling to compete. We always say the levels in grappling, it's survive, defend, and then attack. And I think that he had enough to attack there, right? He's a brown belt. He might have even been promoted to black belt in the interim. He's a really good grappler. This is a guy, on the other hand, that is not that guy, right? He's not going to attack. He's going to try and defend and manage at most. And in this fight, he might have to survive because I think that Basharat's going to be all over him, and I think he's going to be a level above. So we saw when Basharat was put through some adversity, he was put in that same twister situation, right, that made the other guy tap quickly, right? He stood there, he was patient, got himself back to the ground, and got on top. I love everything I've seen from Basharat so far. No reason to doubt him. So give me Basharat in that fight, but hell of a fight, and he's taking on a guy with a lot of experience. So no skin off his nose if he loses here, but I think Lapilus has got to be perfect to win this one, and I think that Basharat has a little bit more margin for error. Next up, brother, we've got Marcus McGhee taking on Gaston Bolanos, and this is a fight that admittedly I want to do a little more research on before I give a firm, opinion, but I'll give you guys what I've got right now. And what I've got is Marcus McGhee, a guy I've watched before and thought to myself, man, he's a wild man, a little bit older. Does he really have the skills to transcend at this level? But he's looked like he's really aggressive, shows up on fight night ready to go, and he's got a lot of aggression. He's got a lot of the right skills. Does he have, a perfect body and a perfect archetype and a perfect situation? No, he's a little bit older. He's not the biggest guy in the world for the division, but he's strong. I think he's pretty fast. And I think he's explosive with his attacks. He'll look for anything from anywhere. So I'm thinking that this is a guy that could definitely go out there and get the win. I think he's opportunistic with his grappling. I don't think he tries to force it in the early going. I just think if he hurts somebody, he doesn't discriminate, right? He'll take anything, including that neck. If you show your neck, he's going to try and latch onto it. So I think of Marcus as a guy that has a pretty clear path to winning this fight. When I look back at Gaston Bolanos, I do see a guy that has, some real talent, right? And I want to go back and watch more of his film, but I only had time to watch the Aaron Phillips fight, and I watched the first 2 rounds. And I'll go back and give some more feedback when I watch more. I was not impressed by the wrestling. I was not impressed by the grappling. I think Aaron Phillips is not a UFC level fighter, just being frank. And I thought that was a disappointing performance at best. So when I look at that, the finishing instincts maybe not quite there for this level for mixed martial arts, right? You got to know how to separate. If you're a striker, look at Israel Adesanya and how he managed distance against somebody like Derek Brunson, right? Guy that wanted to pressure him, back him down, take him down. And he was constantly pushing off at the shoulder, elbow over the top, knee, punishing you. You want to get close? All right, hold these, right? And then creating more space. That's the kind of thing that I don't see the proper distance management from Gaston Bolanos in these fights. And that's why you're getting taken down by guys like Aaron Phillips that aren't that talented. So I just don't know if I see it. He's a guy that's young enough that he could still be making these improvements, getting better. But it's not easy to get good at wrestling in your 30s, right? It's just that's not easy. In your late 20s, it's not easy. You don't see a lot of adult wrestling classes, as people have pointed out before. People don't like to do it. It's hard on the body. It's tiring. It's exhausting. And the looking up at the referee, I mean, the commentators were like, bro, this guy's got to stop talking to the referee. And it was embarrassing almost. That's the answer, right? In 2023 is hey, can you get me up? Not going to work. So yeah, for me, there's a reason I think that the line is kind of blown out here. I could see Gaston Bolanos starching him, right? He's a dangerous striker. He could knock out anybody. But I also just think who's got more paths to victory? It's clearly Marcus for me here. I think either guy could clip each other, but I think Marcus could dominate this guy on the mat. So that's what I foresee happening. How do you feel about this one, brother?
Yeah, I like this fight. I mean, this is actually, honestly, this is one of my favorite fights on the card. I feel like this is perfect matchmaking by the UFC, especially how McGhee's walked into the UFC on short notice against Journey Newson, who I backed Journey Newson to win by submission. What an idiot Journey Newson made me look. Then I actually had the under 2.5, and I had it early against JP Buys and Marcus McGhee at minus 155. So that was just a crazy opener. But I honestly, when I watch McGhee's tape, they call him the maniac for the reason. This guy just does nonstop forward pressure. He switches stances. He has good body kicks. Everything he throws with is power. But this guy can get cracked. I mean, I've seen him cracked on the regional scenes a couple of times. He got cracked really bad against pretty sure it was against Rafael Montini. He got knocked down bad in that fight. Then he kind of fought back through adversity, walked through him, and then just ended up finishing him. Then I'd watched the the Lusando Ramos fight, like Lusando Ramos just didn't want to fight him at all, but like he was actually in the first minute and a half was landing some pretty good shots against McGhee. And once like Ramos started touching him, McGhee's like, all right, screw this. I'm just gonna walk you down and I'm gonna hit you with everything I have. And he absolutely broke this guy, Lusando Ramos, down. And I know he's 8-7, but the guy was never finished once in his career. And they were saying how tough Lusando Ramos really was. And he showed that he was pretty tough in that fight. And he looked really good against Journey Newson, knocked down Journey Newson and club and subbed him and knocked out JP Buys completely. But I'm not impressed with Gaston Bolanos, honestly. Like, this guy literally has like 3 attacks. He literally tries to set up the spinning elbow when he's like half gassed from like a mile away. And you could just tell that it's coming. I'm like, oh, look, here comes the spinning elbow. And then spins himself into a spinning elbow and then gets his back taken into a takedown. It's like, dude, what the fuck are you doing, man? Just strike with the guy and move on the outside. You're a good striker. Stop going for a spinning elbow. I think he has a good right hand. He times the right hand very well. I didn't like the Solo Hatley fight. He kind of was just like battling up against the fence. And he was even like looking at the ref in that fight too. And that was in 2019. Like, dude, you're in 2023 now. What improvements have you made in the grappling edge? I just like really haven't seen it at all. But like, I feel like the way their bookies are pricing this fight, it's like, I know Marcus McGhee by submission, like probably is the look. It's the clear look because Bolanos doesn't have grappling, but I mean, I can't lie. Like Bolanos, I was impressed with his submission defense a little bit because Aaron Phillips did have his back, and like Aaron Phillips is a black belt in jiu-jitsu, and his sub prop was like at plus 900 at the time. And Marcus McGhee doesn't shoot any takedowns. Like I haven't seen this guy wrestle or grapple on the regional scenes. Like the only time I literally have seen him do it is when he club and sub Jerry Newson. Like could he club and sub Gaston Bolanos? Of course he can, but I mean, he is training at the MMA lab. They do some like really good coaching. They really prepare very well for opponents. But I just feel like McGhee's not going to want to, like, he's not going to grapple this guy. I feel like he's going to go out there and really strike with Bolanos. And I do think Bolanos is live. I've seen a lot of people have steamed his money line at like plus 250 because I see McGhee at like minus 214 now on Bet Online. But the way I'm looking at this from a betting perspective is I see the under 2.5 like minus 185. I'm like, well, I'm not going to play that. And then I looked at the fight 10 by knockout and I saw plus 120. I was like, okay, well, this is the play. And here's why for me. It's just because like, we're seeing guys on this card like Preston Parsons, who we know is going to grapple. We know he's going to try to take Semelsberger down. His sub prop is plus 380. And I'm just like, well, for a guy who's going to literally try to take a guy down who has pure power punching over him, why is his sub prop plus 380 compared to Marcus McGhee's, who's plus 330 and doesn't even like grapple or doesn't even wrestle at all? I understand Bolanos' ground game is bad, but he survived back takes. He survived like 2.5 minutes on the back with Phillips. He survived like a literal knee bar attempt from guard. I think it was like the first takedown Phillips went for. He tried to go for a heel hook and then he got on top. And that's when Bolanos was kind of looking like, what the fuck, get me up. Like, how did I even get down here? What just happened? But he did survive the ground game and he looked tired. In that round 3, Bolanos looked awful. He looked really bad in round 3. He looked really tired. So I feel like Marcus McGhee, he can be cracked. I've seen him hit several times and he does the chicken dance sometimes. And if he's going to play with fire here against Bolanos, I feel like this is going to be a war, man. I feel like someone's honestly going to get starched in this fight. So I like the fight to end by knockout plus 120. I just don't really see like McGhee like grappling him or even wrestling. I just haven't seen it on his tape. Could he do it? Yeah, but I feel like Bolanos' game could be improving for a person like McGhee who just doesn't wrestle and grapple that much. So give me the fight to end by knockout here, and I'm picking Marcus McGhee to win by knockout here. But Bolanos is live.
Yeah, man. I think we largely agree on this one. You know, I think I wouldn't rule out a McGhee sub personally, just because like we've seen, he's kind of just insane, right? Like he's thrown the flying knee, as somebody said in the comments, shout out to Brad. He's thrown a flying knee to an RNC, right? Didn't work, but he just goes for anything. But to your point, right? Not a very successful grappler historically, more often getting the job done with his power, with his hands. So I expect that to be the more likely outcome, but I also think, you know, he's a guy that will just take what you give him. And I do think Gaston Bolanos, you know, Aaron Phillips, I don't see him as a guy that's very vicious, very lethal. And Marcus is the opposite, right? Like he might not have as good a technique, but if he grabs a hold of something, he'll pull your head off. Whereas like, I just don't see that same kind of aggression from Aaron Phillips. So for me, that's the distinguishing factor there, but it's a hell of a scrap. And I do think Gaston's best chance to win is by knockout here.
Yeah.
He can win a decision as well, but that'll be close. It'll be competitive. If what we saw last time is still the case, where he could be taken down, he could be put in awkward situations. And it's not like his striking is so good that you're like, wow, this guy can't lose a second on the feet. It's like, no, he'll be in some competitive exchanges anyway in the UFC based on what we saw, especially based on that cardio. So a couple of things that we need to see him improve here if he's going to make a run in this division. But with that being said, brother, let's move to this next one where we've got Matthew Semelsberger, the Jedi, on short notice, taking on Preston Parsons. And this is a fight that you just mentioned, what the sub prop was here, plus 380 or so. I could speak to that just a little bit, which is my gut thought here was, what is Preston Parsons by knockout going to be? And the number is terrible, right? It's like plus 700 or something for what I've seen. Absolutely unplayable number. To your point, he's a submission first guy. He's always looking for the subs. He's taking people to the ground. But what I've seen from him also is like he absolutely bludgeoned Evan Elder in a fight where I thought Evan was going to be competitive, honestly. Like I just thought Evan, if he can defend the takedowns, he's going to keep this honest. He couldn't defend the takedowns and he got bludgeoned in that fight. If he wasn't such a tough bastard, he would have easily got finished there. So I just think, that showed me like Preston Parsons, when he's on top, can beat somebody up. If he wasn't a fool, no disrespect, but if he wasn't a fool last time against Trevin Giles, he knocks that guy out in the first round because he had him completely on skates and then he took him down. So it was like, Trevin Giles grabbing a hold of him in half guard, just holding on, getting his breath back, getting back to his senses, was able to recover in that fight. Shout out to Trevin Giles' corner. I believe he fights out of the War Training Center in Texas, but they did an excellent job just telling him, hey, man, if you continue to like extend the combinations, you're going to get knocked out. But if you just move and jab, this guy can't beat you. So just jab and get out of the way. And then he went out there and jabbed and got out of the way and he won. So it's like Trevin Giles was a better grappler than Preston Parsons. That I know most people would be taken aback by that, but just like he's been around a long time. He's been fighting a long time. He can really grapple. It's just that when he gets hurt, clocked on the feet, guys can submit him. And when he gets tired in the third round, guys can submit him. That's kind of been his like breaking point. Round 3, he's up around, or he's had a competitive 10 minutes and then he just gets broken and submitted in round 3 with a guillotine. That's been the story of his career, but not like I'm a bad grappler or something. In the early going, he's very competitive in those spots. But I think of Preston Parsons and I say, he basically has 2 tracks to a fight, which is I can get the takedown and then it doesn't matter. Like we've seen, he's been hurt regionally, he's been rocked, but he just goes for the takedown, even when he's half concussed, and gets it. And the question is, if he can't get the takedown, he's going to lose. It's just like that's the binary, right? He's not very good on the feet. He gets exposed the longer the fight goes on the feet. And what is Matthew Semelsberger's one redeeming quality is that he just knocks everybody down. He's got 10 knockdowns in 7 UFC fights, if my memory serves. The guy does one thing well. He hits people with power. His takedown defense is not very good. His jiu-jitsu is not UFC level. But when you look at like, what does he do well? He hurts people and he can keep fights competitive if they're on the feet for 15 minutes. He can keep that going. But I think that number one, the biggest problem I see with him is like last time out, I thought that was a favorable matchup against Uros Medic, straight up. Like I just think of Uros Medic as a 0 grappler in the division. I'm like, take him to the ground, like get on top of him. I was like, man, Matthew Semelsberger finally has a grappling advantage. No, like he just doesn't even go out there and try. Like he's just willing to exchange on the feet, knocks him down. And we see that. Why does he have 10 knockdowns in 7 UFC fights and he hasn't won them all? It's like the guy just doesn't have great finishing instincts, unless you're terrible and just get folded on the first punch. He'll drop you 3-4 times and not finish you. He'll just keep knocking you down, let you back up because he doesn't know how to get on top of somebody and finish. He doesn't know how to take the back and finish. He doesn't know how to, just work from the mount. We see so many times he fumbles winnable fights. And so he's now a small favorite, short notice. A couple things I think working against him. And I do think like Preston Parsons is probably going to do the chicken dance on you at least one time in this fight. He gets hit cleanly every fight he's ever had, but we've seen him submit UFC level guys. Ignacio Bahamondes, granted he's a 155er. He's a big fellow, right? And he just easily dominated him, took him to the ground, finished him. We saw him get hurt on the regional scene. I put up a video of that on my Twitter as well. Gets hurt, rocked, wobbled. He just goes, F it. I'm getting the takedown anyway. Just took him down. But then we saw against big guys in the UFC, against what's the hell is the guy's name? He's been cut. The prison guy, Daniel Rodriguez. Daniel Rodriguez, he's just a big fellow. He said, I'm not going to the ground. Defended the takedowns. He had no answers, right? He kept throwing big shots, but like his shots are, a guy who's a wrestler trying to strike. Whereas, the other guy is just trying to hurt you. Daniel Rodriguez is a striker trying to hurt you. So he picked him apart in one round. So I think of this fight as like so clear a dynamic. If this fight is on the ground, I think Preston Parsons is going to be mauling Semelsberger. I think he's going to pass his guard. I think he's going to do anything he wants to. I think he's going to beat him up. But then I also just have a feeling if it's not on the ground, this guy is getting finished with a shocking quickness because he's going to get hurt. He's going to get dropped, and he's not going to have too many answers except go back to this takedown. And we saw D-Rod very quickly learned like uppercuts. Like I need to just throw my big shots. And then as soon as this guy level changes, throw an uppercut. And then he clocked him and just absolutely folded him up. That's kind of what I envision here. If Semelsberger's got a good game plan and a brain, haven't seen evidence of that. So for me, dog or pass at this point. I think Preston Parsons has a chance to get it done at ITD. But for me, I just haven't been sold on him enough to play him at plus 115. You know, if I'm seeing a plus 150, then maybe my tune changes here. But Preston Parsons makes enough mistakes that I'm willing to let this one go. And I do think that there's a world in which he just puts on another competitive, like gross decision type fight and gets the win. Whereas that's what keeps me off the total here. I think more often than not, this fight ends inside the distance, but it's being priced accordingly. It's like minus 200, minus 230 to end inside the distance. And both of these guys have found ways to sneak to that over, to sneak to that GTD before. So for me, I'm probably just going to have to let this fight go, but it is a compelling matchup. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, so I actually have like my biggest bet of the card is on the fight doesn't go to decision. Minus one, it was at minus 165 earlier on Bet Online. Once I saw that number, I just bombed it. I put 2.5 units on it. I'm considerably gonna add a unit, maybe at minus 200. Like I just really like the spot. I mean, I think the fight that just really sticks out on the tape for me is the AJ Fletcher fight. Like AJ Fletcher, who wasn't like literally was like a college football player, transitioned to MMA. First thing they literally said he knew how to do was strike, and he was going out there and looking like a D1 fucking wrestler against Semelsberger. Really, like, if you go watch how Semelsberger was getting up against him, like, Fletcher's like, oh, shit, I could just pull for a guillotine on you. Like, Fletcher had him in 2 guillotines I think Parsons finishes him with, and he had him in, like, a bad head and arm, too. And I was just, like, a little bit shocked. And, like, Semelsberger, like, literally, like, the way he won that fight is because Fletcher just lost position, like, midway in the second round, and Semelsberger was just able to ride out the round on top and keep the fight on the feet in the third round. And I just feel like the way how Preston Parsons fights is just from pure pressure. I mean, guy has 9 of his 10 wins coming by submission. 8 of them are in the very first round. So clearly the guy has first round cardio like everybody does. And I backed him against Trevin Giles. I had a 1 unit bet on him. I maybe thought I got robbed at the time, but when I rewatched it, I'm like, yeah, he kind of deserved to lose a little bit. Because, like, if you just watch early, Giles was just hurting him, man. And it's like the first 5 seconds of the fight, Preston Parsons literally just ran at him and got him right up to the fence right away. Like, literally, he just wants to suffocate you every single second of the fight. And I feel like Parsons, he just doesn't move his head at all. He gets hit a lot. And, like, I feel like if you're just going to do that against Semelsberger, as you said, Liam, like, this guy's power for the division is ridiculous. I mean, I'll never forget having plus 800 on him to knock out Jake Matthews. And it was just, I mean, it's just like, come on, dude. Finish the fucking guy. Come on, man. But, like, I feel like here just against Parsons, like, I just feel like Parsons just doesn't have an answer for him. But as you mentioned, like, Parsons does pack power. Like, he doesn't know how to technically box at all because everything he does with his wrestling is just full power explosion in the legs. Everything that he's doing is just pure pressure. And he does the same thing with his punches. That's why he gasses himself. And that's why you tend to see him, like, tired in the third round and not get takedowns. But I think the fight that also sticks out is the Jeremiah Wells fight. Like, he cracks Wells in the first 15 seconds of the fight. And that was from Jeremiah Wells running at him. That's the same thing that Preston Parsons is going to do. But which I think is the difference between Wells and Parsons is I feel like Wells is just like more like has like better fight IQ and knows like, okay, well, if I lose position, I'm going to get hurt again. I don't want to pass position on this guy because this guy has power. Unlike Preston Parsons, and you watch him in almost every single fight, literally, like, he's passing position. He's going for head and arms. I mean, he had, like, 6 submission attempts on Evan Elder? Like, I feel like this fight is literally the perfect recipe for violent striker versus grappler. Like, Parsons, I don't think his chin is really that good. I know he got knocked down 4 days notice against D-Rod, but this guy's finished in 3 of his 4 losses against probably the most powerful guy he's facing on short notice as well. And as you said, Liam, Semelsberger's jiu-jitsu, I think, fucking sucks. I think it's really bad, and I think Parsons can completely expose him for it. So I love the fight doesn't go to decision. I have it at minus 165 for 2.5 units, and I think the Preston Parsons submission at plus 380 and even round one submission, I think, is a pretty genuine line, knowing that Semelsberger has been put in bad spots against AJ Fletcher, who I don't really think his jiu-jitsu's there, and Wells, who's just contented to lay in his guard. And you could just tell the first time that Wells actually passed position was in the third round. He passed it so easy. So easy. It was the easiest pass you could possibly have seen. That was the first time he passed position the whole fight because he was rocked and wobbled in the first seconds of the fight. And I just don't feel like Parsons is going to be able to recover. I think it's going to be a high level. I think it's going to be a high pressure fight. And I just absolutely love violence, man. Like it's my favorite bet of the card. It's my favorite bet of the year so far. I mean, I know it's the first card, but yeah, I love it a lot. I'm very confident. And I did a breakdown video on it as well earlier in the week about it. So yeah, I love my spot here a lot.
I like it. And if you guys are looking for his videos, you can find them in the description below as well. So shout out to our guy PropAholic for the look. And, you know, you got ahead of the number here as well. This is a spot where I think that, you know, I could definitely see this fight ending inside the distance. You know, and you're looking at minus 195, minus 200 or so across the board now. I think that this is a fight that more often than not, two welterweights, two guys with clear vulnerabilities as well. Seems like it's got violence written all over it. And a lot of times when we see those flash finishes in round one, somebody that took the fight on short notice, you know, and like for good or for ill, right? We saw that with Josh Emmett and Bryce Mitchell, but we've seen that a number of different times in the UFC. Somebody takes the fight on short notice and then things turn out sideways for them, or they go and just empty the jug in round one because they know, hey, maybe I don't have the cardio to push for 15 minutes, but I have the skill or, you know, the upside to get the finish in the first round. So hopefully they get out and go to work early for you and somebody gets the finish. But I'm leaning towards Preston Parsons as potentially, you know, playing that role of spoiler here by having a full camp and knowing, hey, the mission here is to get this guy to the ground, make him really uncomfortable. And we've seen that chin doesn't necessarily hold up for Semi if he gets tested as well. You know, I remember the Chaos Williams fight. His brother had to like talk him back into the third round there because he was really doubting himself and down on himself going into round three. So just something else to watch for there. You know, it's one thing to be in a competitive striking fight and somebody talks you back into it. Your will is a lot more easily broken when somebody's just on top of you, beating you up, and you can't get up and you can't get anything going offensively. Can really create doubt. So with that being said, let's move to this prelim headliner, guys, where we've got Andrei Arlovski in the heavyweight division taking on Waldo Cortes-Acosta. And this is a fight where at first I thought to myself, man, there's not a chance in hell that I could lay this kind of number or ever, you know, be on the side of Waldo in a fight like this because I've been screwed too many times, right? Like I learned my lesson from getting screwed betting Andrei fights, right? I bet Jake Collier, thought I clearly won that fight. I thought, you know, I deserved the money there and I lost a lot of money. Like it was a serious chunk of change on that one. So I just said to myself, man, betting against Arlovski in the Apex is negative EV. This guy is just going to get robbery after robbery. They like him. You know, the crowd there is going to cheer for him. But the truth is, watching that last fight with Don'Tale Mayes, I mean, I think Don'Tale Mayes is not very good, right? I just don't think of him as a high-level guy. Yes, he injured John Jones, you know, but you look at Don'Tale Mayes, and I just say, man, this is not a guy that's very high level. And he looked so much faster. He looked so much more athletic. And Don'Tale Mayes, again, if we're lining up all the people by athleticism in the UFC, he ain't going to be in the front of the line, right? He's going to be kind of towards the middle, average end. He's a little bit above that, but he's not a crazy athlete. He can do some jumping and kicks and whatever he gasses out in 7 minutes. Like he's just a heavyweight athlete. He's not a crazy athlete. But he made Andrei Arlovski look like an old man. He just was out there just dancing around him, hitting him with big shots way faster. And that's not the first time that's happened to Andrei, right? That's like the 12th time that's happened to Andrei off the top of my head, right? I'm not pulling up his share dog, but just like he's been through bouts before where people are like, his chin was gone 7 years ago. You know, it's like, and now it's at the point where he's ancient. He gets paid a lot of money. And I don't think the UFC wants him around too much longer, right? Like he's more of just like a legacy piece. Like, hey, Andrei's on the card, you know, but like they're not using this guy to sell out venues. They're not putting him in main events anymore. So I think he's probably just a financial burden for the company. And they're looking around like, hey, who can we build up, you know, to get rid of him with? Because now he's losing to the Don'Tale Mayes of the division. They're giving him, you know, the jobber candidates. They're giving him the enhancement talent. He's losing to those guys. They're like, all right, no more of that. Let's not waste it. Let's get a real heavyweight prospect in here, former professional athlete from the baseball scene that could come in and potentially line up Andrei Arlovski and hit a home run, right? Or conversely, and here's the one thing that I think might be a contrarian look on this fight. I think people will not talk about this, but I think there's a non-zero chance that we see Andrei Arlovski get submitted in this spot, right? Like Waldo is definitely a primary striker. He's a boxer. He has a boxing background, but Andrei Arlovski has no fucking ground game. Okay. He's been fighting for 25 years. He doesn't have a ground game. He never did. Right. And you look at the fact that he gets taken down by Tom Aspinall and his reaction was, like he gets taken down. He gets his back taken instantly. The fight's over. Right. There's just not a lot of good reactions when we see Andrei get taken down. He's just down. That's it. All right, I'm taken down. Shit, that sucks. Like he might turn to get back up to his feet, but it's going to give his back every time. I thought to myself, Waldo's never grappled anybody. And then I went back and I watched his regional fights. And there's been guys that tried to grapple him or just push him against the fence, grab a hold of him. He's more athletic. He's faster. He's got better balance. He just pushes him over. It lands on top, sometimes in the mount, sometimes in the half guard. I saw him passing guard on these guys that aren't that high level, but they're active fighters. They're guys that are coming up in actual MMA gyms today. They've been training recently in the last 5 and 10 years where you have to wrestle and grapple. You can't just be Andrei and be like, I've been here for 20 years. Fuck, I didn't learn that. Like, I don't know. Like, I think of Andrei as a guy that has just enough wrestling and grappling to not be a complete bum, a complete zero. But it's heavyweight. Nobody ever tests that. And I just think to myself, like, what happens if Andrei is stuck underneath Waldo for 2 minutes? I think he quits. 100%. I'm like, if this guy's underneath Waldo, he's going to fucking be like, get off me. Like, please. I already cashed the 400,000. We're good. I don't need to get this win, young man. I'm a former champion. It's all good. So I just see a lot of ways that this fight ends with Andrei losing inside the distance. I kind of see why the steam has come in here. If it goes to decision, you're going to be like, man, minus 600 was a mistake, but I just don't see that happening. You know, I see Andrei as a guy that's past prime and really in over his head, I think, in this one. So could he get the win? Yeah, we've seen it before. Close fights, close wins, but I don't see it here. How do you feel about this one, brother?
Yeah, sorry that my camera's like a little bit like laggy now. I don't know why it just did that, but I like Acosta to win here. I mean, I like Acosta to win, but it's minus 700. I actually picked him to win by knockout, which really I don't think is shocking at all. I put 1.8 units on it. Pretty shitty line, but I mean, just go watch the Andrei Arlovski versus Carlos Felipe fight, because if you guys want to go watch sloppy heavyweights in the second and third round, it took 15 minutes off my life, and it was horrifying. I mean, Andrei Arlovski was looking up at the clock, I think 2.5 minutes into the second round. And Felipe, we just know who doesn't really have any cardio, was able to like actually like push a pace on him, which I thought was bad. I know he got the split decision win, but Felipe was having a better third round, which I mean, I've never seen Felipe like really have good third rounds. So I was just a little bit shocked. And then, I mean, I just go watch the Acosta film, the Thomas Peterson fight on the LFA regional scene. I thought was the eye opener. Peterson was taking him down, cracked him early. He got knocked down. Third round comes back at him, and he just lands an absolutely nasty right hand to the chin. Basically, kind of like just like folded his jaw, where Peterson just looked at him like all stunned because he was being cocky the whole fight. And we've seen Peterson how he is in the Toughen House too. Like he can eat shots, and Acosta was able to just fold him. And Chase Sherman, we know Chase Sherman is awful, but Chase Sherman, one thing we know about him is he's pretty damn tough. And he was eating a lot. He ate I think 30 to 35 shots repetitively to the head, which Arlovski is just not going to do here at all. He's going to fold on his shots. And the speed advantage is just off the charts here. Like Acosta, I know he can't really check leg kicks. I mean, Arlovski is going to, this is what I just think is going to happen. Arlovski is going to try to kick his leg early. He's going to try to use a lot of his movement as he does late in his career. He's 44. He doesn't want to eat shots. That's why they've adjusted him late in his career where he has to use a lot of more lateral movement. But after the first round, man, this guy doesn't move at all, man. He's kind of just so stationary on the feet where Acosta's going to pressure him. He has good pressure. And he in the third round, as you mentioned, Liam, against DeLima, where he was getting grappled, he actually went for a Kimura on bottom, which I was like, you know, the guy doesn't really keep it out of his mind that he will try to attempt a submission. But I think he's going to knock him out. I didn't really know that the submission, I didn't know inside a distance was going to be minus 180, minus 190 on DraftKings, where I paid minus 180 on Bet Online for the KO, because I thought it was going to be minus 250 later in the week. Kind of read that line wrong, but yeah, man, I think Acosta is going to honestly just maul maul Arlovski into retirement here. I just think Acosta is going to destroy him, man. I also had Acosta and Brzezinski fight doesn't go in the last fight, which a lot of people didn't like that bet at all for me. They're like, well, let's go into decision. Acosta doesn't finish anybody. Well, he finished him, so I think he's going to be able to finish Arlovski here pretty easily. So yeah, give me Acosta by round 1 KO and murder.
Yeah, and he actually has 6 finishes as a professional. So I think people kind of underrated the finishing equity going into that fight.
Yeah,
I think that's
they
a
did.
great point by you. And sometimes people just look at the most recent performances, but I like to zoom out and look at divisional trends because sometimes the divisional trend is your friend, right? Like, why am I going to look at just like the most recent data from these guys when, we could look at a long-term sample size and say, hey, this is a spot where, the division is ending inside because people get married to what they see recently. So I think that's a great point. But with that being said, my man, let's move along to this main card because I know that you've got some important reservations to get to. So with that being said, we could speed it up. We got Phil Hawes here taking on Bruno Ferreira. And this is a fight that a lot of people are active on, right? You got Phil Hawes, who's coming off a knockout loss. You got Bruno Ferreira, who's coming off a knockout loss. So typically you'd think, hey, everybody's going to want to stay away from this fight, right? Inherent volatility. But instead, it's the opposite, right? Everybody seems to be very interested in betting on this fight and picking a side, right? Getting involved in a closely lined fight. And for me, I don't feel like I have a massive edge here, but let me just walk through why I can't bet on Bruno Ferreira at the chalk price as it stands right now. Just because he's coming off the knockout loss. I don't project him to have grappling upside, wrestling upside, takedown upside in this fight. So I think that his path is most likely to knock him out or to win a close decision, right? And we've seen, just based on the data historically, Phil Hawes has fought better guys. Like, he's fought a very high quality of competition in his recent run in the UFC, which is kind of making me think the UFC hates this guy, right? Like, they're just like, go out there and fight this guy who's a murderer, this guy who's a killer. Like, there's no favors. That's the joke I always make. It's like, no hype, Phil Hawes. No favors, Phil Hawes. They're just like, go out there and fight this murderous Russian Alaskarov that nobody's ever heard of. That's the kind of thing that tells me, man, maybe they're not trying to get behind this guy. They're not trying to back him. Everybody thought Ruziboev was a fraud, right? Plus 190. But I just said to myself, I'm like, man, he's huge. He's way bigger than this guy. And he's coming off a knockout one. So, like, he's going to be hyped. Everybody's going to be behind this guy. So I bet Ruziboev, speculative. He went out there and just chinned the guy early. And I was like, man, that was the easiest bet of the year. Like, how did I not bet it for more? And then I go back and I look at this fight and I'm like, you're not getting the plus 190, right? That's what made it an easy click for me. I was like, plus 190? The guy's fucking twice his size. Like, how wrong could I be? Like, I was like, man, everybody thinks he's a fraud, but like, I don't know. Let's find out. And when I'm looking at it here, I'm just like, okay, you've got a guy who in Phil Hawes is way bigger, right? If anybody has wrestling or grappling upside, it's probably Phil Hawes. And both guys just got brutally knocked out. So it's like, yeah, I would kind of say it's got to be a dog or pass for me from those standpoints. But my gut feeling on this fight was that Phil Hawes is probably going to get knocked out because that's the Phil Hawes story. Like, he should win a lot of fights. He should do good. He should do this, that, and the other. And it just doesn't always work out that way, right? Skills should pay the bills. They should win more fights than not, but it's not a foolproof science. And I do think that Phil Hawes is a guy that's a busted prospect. I do think the UFC is out on building Phil Hawes because of the knee injuries, because of the knockout losses, because of the start-stop nature of his career. But I also don't think Bruno Ferreira is like the next middleweight contender, right? I don't think he's like the guy that they're trying to build up. He caught RoboCop right before he's about to have a kid, and he's like, half interested in the fight and like half at the hospital with his wife, and then gets knocked out in the first round because RoboCop's done that a million times. Like, RoboCop gets into brawling exchanges with everybody. So for me, that wasn't that surprising, right? I was like, minus 300 RoboCop feels like banana peel territory. Gutted I didn't take it. But just looking at how this fight is being priced, I think it should be a closely lined fight. So I would only bet Phil Hawes, kind of a similar situation to Parsons, right? I kind of lean towards that side, but I only bet it if I'm getting bigger plus money here because Phil Hawes is such a liability that I don't care if I'm getting marginal value at plus 110. I'll be sick in my hands if I bet Phil Hawes and he gets chinned in the first exchange, which is very possible. So for me, I'm leaning with Phil Hawes here. I actually think he can make this look really easy if he takes it to the ground. And, he's a big guy, physical, strong, works on his grappling. And I believe he's been training up in Philly, particularly working on his grappling with these guys like Dawkins and whoever. That's a great idea. Like, what should he be working on? Not striking anymore, Phil. Stop striking. Go out there and wrestle these guys, take them to the ground. Roman Dolidze, that's the wrong guy to take to the ground. Everybody else, take him to the ground, and he's going to beat him up. And I think that he could do that in this spot. How do you feel, brother?
Yeah, I mean, if Hall's chin wasn't shit, I mean, I would be betting him here. But like, honestly, I might be getting to it. Like, I just feel like skill wise, obviously, it's Phil Hawes all day. I mean, Ferreira's tape, like, I backed Ferreira, but I had CLV on him at -110 against Ruzabov, and I was just fucking pissed off that he got knocked out and Arbat on it all because I was questioning it all week to Arbat on that. But like, I just don't think Ferreira is all that good, if I'm going to be quite honest with you. Like, yeah, he has all his wins inside of distance, but it's like he's kind of just facing cans. And like, if you look at the regional scene and you look at the physique on these guys, they're all like over bloated, like, and they're all like old. Like, even his contender series fight, he ate a couple of shots and he just like, he just ran at them chaotically and tried to knock him out. Is that like what gives Phil Hawes problems? Yes, but like, I think Phil Hawes is going to absolutely work the body of Ferreira here. Like, Ferreira leaves the body wide open the way he stands. He switches stances so much too. He's using so much movement and he overextends on almost every single combination. It's like Phil Hawes has been in Tiger Muay Thai. He's been down in Thailand. Now he's in Philly training on his grappling. Like, this is what he should do. He should grapple. And the only thing I don't like is his durability. Also, like, he throws like, I mean, just watch the Darren Wynn fight. I think he threw like 85 strikes in the first round. He kind of slew down in the second round, obviously, a little bit, but it's like he's so high volume early. And I feel like in the Ikram Aliskerov fight, I was there live, and I was like, wow, Hawes is just he's demolishing him. I had Aliskerov parlayed, and then boom, I mean, he gets knocked out, but it was a head kick that like kind of stumbled him, and Hawes did like just kind of looked at him a little weird, didn't try to like put his hands up. He was like a little bit cocky, and he paid the damn price for it. And I feel like he really has learned a lesson in his last 3 fights. Like, I can't really give him shit about the Roman Dolce fight. Like, Dolce is a top 15 middleweight contender. And he was, I think was that his first fight at middleweight? I'm not too sure. But he, like, Roman, you don't play heel hooks with Roman Dolce. You just don't play that game in him. And that's what Phil Hawes did. And that's what got him brutally knocked out. I feel like they should have called it after his leg was stumbling. There was no necessary damage he should have ate in there, and he did. But
I think he owed that ref money, dude.
Yeah, man. That was a brutal knockout, man. But I just feel like Hawes is the front kicks to the body here. I feel like is just gonna get to Ferreira, man. I feel like Hawes can break him. I've seen people fight Hawes by decision at +1,000. I mean, I don't hate that line at all. The one fight that just gives me red flags is that Kyle Dawkins fight, man. Kyle Dawkins threw the laziest spinning back fist I've ever seen in my life, and Phil Hawes did the chicken dance. And Dawkins had no cardio to finish him, but what Hawes did in that fight was grapple, a better grappler, and he was able to get him down, hold position, and survive that adversity. So I was a little bit impressed, especially because it was middle in the second round. So, and he has wins over like Nasruddin Imavov as well. So it's like, this guy is beating the better competition. He's faced the better competition. And it's like everyone's scared to bet him, but everyone wasn't scared to bet him against Aliskerov. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, I'm on the Phil Hawes train, +170. Let's go. And he was winning, and then he got knocked out. Same thing could happen here, but I mean, I'm getting him plus money against a guy who just has knockout power and doesn't really have good wrestling and just relies on just overhands and just like trying to counter you. And the more I talk about it, I want to bet Phil Hawes, but I don't know if my consciousness can get there, man. But I'm picking Phil Hawes to win, and I'm picking him to break down Ferreira. I'm picking Phil Hawes to win in the middle of the second round, dude. I think he finishes him to the body. I think the body work and the front kicks and all the kicks is just going to be a problem for Ferreira, man.
Yeah, I can see a number of different ways this fight goes, but I also could just see Phil Hawes like taking him down and bludgeoning him. I really could, because like I don't know that people recognize how good Dolidze is off of his back. And like we've seen it a number of times now where somebody gets on top of Dolidze thinking, hey, this is gonna turn out well for me. And then all of a sudden it's like Jack Hermansson's on top, then he's face down getting TKO'd. It's like it can change in a blink when somebody really understands how to control your legs. And that's what was happening. You know, he just was way above him in that category. And I don't see that for Bruno Ferreira here. You know, he doesn't have the same kind of limb length either. You know, Dolidze is kind of a big, awkward guy. So shout out to Sweet D, says, meh, Ferreira stands very bladed, hard to front kick dudes that don't square up. Fair play. But I do think that he's got a number of different attacks that could be effective here. But if it's just a fight that plays out on the feet, I think that's a huge mistake. You know, I think that Phil is just not a guy that has the durability to reliably stand on the feet for that long. So great fight, good matchmaking. You know, two guys coming off a knockout loss, but this is kind of an S or get off the pot fight. for Phil Haas, right? If he loses this fight, he's probably getting cut. So I do like to back guys typically in that spot. But again, like I said, I need more plus money with my guy Phil.
It's so hard.
True that, brother. But with that being said, we've got the next fight on the card. One of the closest line fights and a fascinating one here between Ricky Simon and Mario Bautista. Two guys on the come up in some ways, right? Ricky, obviously the more established guy, but just got that little knockback down the rung, right? He was on a 5-fight win streak, was building himself up, kind of like where Mario Bautista was right now. And then he got served that humble pie by Sung Yadong. Sung Yadong, problem for everybody right now, right? I think even in that Corey Sandhagen fight where I cashed Corey Sandhagen by knockout plus 450, I was shitting my pants. Like, oh my God, this guy is a cyborg. He's never going down. Like, he's coming forward with everything. And I think about this fight and I say, Ricky is a good fighter, very talented. He's got real, skills in every position. But I've also always seen some flaws with Ricky, right? Like the big spot against Uriah Faber. I know that's the classic knock on him, but it's like, that was a real setup opportunity, fumbled the bag there a little bit. Okay, that's going to be a knock against you. So then you got to go the hard route. You got to build up a bunch of wins. You got to go the hard way. Same thing happened to Bautista, right? If you look, he comes in, he makes a debut against Corey Sandhagen. Nobody wants to do that, right? Huge problems, gets finished there. Then he got caught. He got surprised, clipped. Oh, okay. Maybe this guy doesn't have the chin. Maybe he doesn't have the durability. So they gave him a lot more soft matchmaking. And then he showed, I can deliver. If you give me soft matchmaking, I'll go out there and finish these guys and get, some wins under my belt. And now I think the confidence is there. He's a guy that's quiet. He's not out there marketing himself maybe like you want to see, but he's quietly just built himself into a much more competitive guy, much more confident guy, a guy who's willing to go out there and throw. And he kind of didn't bring his best self to some of those fights in the past, right? Where we saw against Corey Sandhagen, he kind of froze up a little bit. He was on the defense from moment one in that fight. And then additionally, when he lost it was Trevin Jones, right? Yeah, he got knocked out by Trevin Jones. And when he got clipped in that fight, he was winning early on. And then Trevin Jones just stayed in there, clipped him, and then was able to find that big shot. So I think of Mario Bautista as a guy that if he could stay on the gas pedal, he should be able to win a fight like this. Or he should at least be able to compete in a fight like this. But the danger factor is, I think both of these guys have somewhat questionable durability, right? Like both of these guys can be clipped and hurt. That for me introduces some uncertainty, right? Because I think that just skill for skill, I kind of like what Bautista does a little bit more. I think Ricky sometimes, if I could critique his game, it's a lot more flash than it is substance sometimes with the grappling. Like he takes people down, he picks them up, slams them, and then they get up. It's like he did a lot of energy expenditure for very little result sometimes. And that would be my criticism. You look at how some of the wins have aged, the Asuncao, and these guys are a little bit past prime, right? Maybe not at their best. And guys that were at their best, like a Rob Font, were able to go out there and defend most of the takedowns, keep it on the feet, and then just punish him for that. Use the length, use some attributes to keep this guy at bay. So I think Ricky's definitely coming along. He's definitely got great skills everywhere, but he just seems to me like a guy that he could be put off early in a fight. I thought he kind of broke against Sung Yadong early on in that fight and then was just hanging on, trying to make it to the end and couldn't do so because he took too much damage. And that was a long, drawn-out beating, where he was taking a lot of damage over the course of that fight. He's been hurt in other fights, finished early. So those are a couple of the things that give me pause here. I think it's a dog or pass at the over plus 150 mark for Mario Bautista because he's got momentum on his side. But it's a step up in competition. So it's a speculative investment. But for me, I kind of like the momentum of Mario and all the things he's bringing to the table. I talked about hotbeds for talent in this bantamweight division. Arizona's one of them, right? The champion's out there. Kyler Phillips is out there. And a bunch of other guys are training at the MMA lab, putting in that good work. Henry Cejudo and company as well, at the fight ready scene. So they've got a lot of lightweights, talented fighters in these smaller divisions. And I think he's going to only be getting better each fight, Mario Bautista. So excited to see what he produces here, but big fight, big matchup at 135. How do you feel about it, brother?
Yeah, so I like Simone here. I put 1.54 units on him at minus 154 on a points bet. It was I bet it last week. I just don't really think that Bautista is going to be matching with him in the wrestling department here. Can Mario Bautista grapple? Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what's really been winning him his last couple of fights at the UFC level. And I just feel like if that's what he's going to try to rely on here with the guy like Simone, I just don't really think that that's his path to victory. His path is to be on the outside and strike and kind of just stay away from the takedowns. But like, I feel like an eye opener for me was the Jay Perrin fight. Like, Perrin was coming in on short notice up a weight class, and he was able to get him down twice in the middle of the octagon. At some point in the fight, Perrin was pressuring him. Like, it was almost like Batista's like, okay, well, I can't get you down, but I'm just going to try to hold you up against the fence because I don't really like your pressure. That was like an eye opener to me. He got taken down against Perrin twice. He got taken down in the middle of the octagon against a 43-year-old Guido Canetti, who literally had him in the middle of the octagon. And I know Blackshear is a very good grappler, and I understand, yeah, it was on a week's notice, and he was training for Cody Garbrandt and the Pure Striker. But, I mean, there were moments in that fight, too, where, like, Blackshear was able to get him down and hold position on him as well. And if you look at the striking in the first round, Blackshear was putting it on him. I didn't like the way how Mario Bautista was reacting to shots. I honestly think his chin is very suspect, if I'm going to be quite honest with you. And Simone, like, has that pressure. And the one thing I just want to, like, take away from you about the Simone and Song-Yadong fight, like, I feel like Simone just didn't want to fight in the later rounds because it actually was a headbutt that knocked him down in the second round. And I thought the first round was, like, a little bit competitive, but after that headbutt, that's when Simone, he was just kind of like, he said he was basically just kind of lost in that fight after that headbutt. And it was a 5-round fight, and he wasn't really prepared for a 5-round fight. That's why he didn't wrestle early like he frantically does in 3-round fights, because he knows how to put up with that pressure. And he took, like, Jack Shore's a very good grappler. I think Jack Shore's a very good grappler. I feel like that's where he has most of his success. And that's where Simone was able to just kind of hold him up against, flip him up against the fence and do some work. And he was able to knock him down and submit Jack Shore. And I feel like Simone's going to be more explosive here. He's going to have the more offensive wrestling here. I feel like the body work of Mario Bautista could be a little bit of an issue because Simone does get hit to the body, I would say a pretty good amount. But everyone's saying, oh, well, Mario Bautista is going to time a flying knee. Like, yeah, he got a flying knee against Miles Johns, but Miles Johns is way less volume, doesn't really know how to mix his wrestling, honestly, I think, with his volume and his striking like Ricky Simone does. So I just really like this spot for Simone. I feel like it's a pretty good bounce-back fight for him. And Mario Bautista is winning his last fights with grappling. Like, you're not going to win fucking grappling against Ricky Simone. You're going to win staying on the outside and trying to stay away from his takedowns. But I think this is a good bounce-back fight for Simone. I think his top pressure is just going to be too much for Mario Bautista. I think the wrestling is going to be too much, and I think he's going to honestly land the more power shots on the feet. So, yeah, I like Ricky Simone here at minus 154. I think he's like minus 190 now. I would kind of just stay away. But if the value play here is, it's definitely Mario Bautista. But I also like the overs in this fight as well. I think if you're a time prop guy like me, I'm a prop guy. I don't like to bet overs, but I think the over 2.5 is a pretty safe parlay piece here as well.
You know, I've heard a lot of people on the over this week, and I've gone back and forth in my mind because, like, I can definitely see this fight going over. You know, like, I see both guys as primary decision guys, but I also just think, like, you mentioned it, like, maybe the durability is a little questionable on Mario Bautista. I think the same thing's true of Ricky, like, not out overtly, but, like, again, most guys at 135 aren't getting knocked out by 41-year-olds one way or the other. It's just not happening. So it's like you look at the data set, and I'm like, everybody's convinced that this fight's going over, which I could, like I said, I could definitely see it. But I thought the exact same thing about the Jack Shore fight. And then Jack Shore got finished. I was really surprised there. I think that Ricky has maybe underrated power. I think that Mario Bautista has maybe underrated submission grappling. So those are a couple of the things that make me like, man, maybe it could just get interesting at some point in this fight where fast-paced division. But you look at the data set historically, it does suggest bantamweight fights over 50% of the time go in the distance, especially 3-round bookings since 2022. Shout out to Nate Latshaw. Really good data, really good information. And that's something that I noted as well. I was like, my heart says maybe play into the variance here, but the numbers say not enough value. So for me, I don't feel compelled to play this fight, but you got in early. You beat the number here again pretty considerably on that money line for Ricky Simone. So we're wishing you the best of luck, brother. I think at the plus 160 or above, I would be tempted to take Bautista if I got involved. But right now, I'm keeping my hands clean to this fight because I just don't have the strongest read. So we're rooting for our guest on this one. But with that being said, brother, let's move to the meat of this card, man. The top 3 fights on the bill. I think these are the 3 most fun fights on the card. So let's do it. Let's break it down. Just want to do some quick housekeeping and say, If you guys haven't already, make sure you drop a like on the show. Get subscribed to the channel because we're here talking fights each and every week. And now we've got fights back in our life each and every week from the UFC to talk about. So we've got a lot of great breakdowns coming your way. And all these fights that we've talked about will be clipped out, will be broken down on timestamps for you guys as well if you want to revisit the show. So thank you very much for the time and the patience. With that being said, back to the action here where we've got the featured bout at 155 pounds. Jimmy Miller, A10, back in the building, taking on Gabriel Benitez, PropAholic. Why don't you get us started, brother?
Yeah, so I'm on the Benitez side here. Mine didn't go in my way. I put one unit on him at minus 105 earlier in the week. He's actually plus 130 now on Bet Online, which I honestly am probably going to double down on this guy. Like, I like Jim Miller. Don't get me wrong. I mean, yes, people are like, please, Jim, don't take any damage. So you can fight at UFC 300. Guys, he's taking fucking damage in this fight. No doubt in my mind, he takes damage, and he's going to take it very early. Like, when you watch Benitez, like, this guy's having moments against Youssef, and go watch the Sadiq Youssef fight. Sadiq Youssef runs at him and literally throws 5 overhand rights and hits him with 3 of them, and Benitez is just smiling and laughing at him. Proceeds to drop him in the middle of the second round, middle in the first round, almost finishes him, but then gets finished. Has really good moments against Onama as well. Hurts Onama very bad, but then Onama is able to finish him as well. And I just feel like with Benitez he is so good at fighting in tight, close boxing range, where I think Miller is honestly kind of slacks his department in. And I feel like Miller's like last 5 opponents, like go watch the Eric Gonzalez fight. He gets fucking hurt really bad in the first 2.5 minutes. He's doing a chicken dance. Gonzalez takes him down. Like, if Gonzalez doesn't mess around at the end of the round, Gonzalez easily takes that first round. But he ends up getting knocked out because he overextends himself. I don't know what the hell Eric Gonzalez was doing, trying to do a front kick and then get himself into a left-handed Jim Miller. Just not how you're going to beat Jim Miller at all. And then in the Motta fight, as I said with Motta earlier, Motta's so stationary. He's so boxing heavy. He doesn't know how to check leg kicks. And as they were saying, Jim Miller invented the calf kick. So why not kick him and not take shots? And Jim Miller was able to obliterate the lead leg. Looks good against Hernandez, I thought. But what I thought really stuck open is Hernandez was doing so good in tight boxing range, and he landed so many knees to the body. So it was unrepetitively so many knees. I understand Jim Miller is very tough. People think he's very durable, but he is now 40 years old. I know you say the thing again about Benitez. He's 35. He only fights once a year, but I think on the feet, it's Benitez all day. And people who are shitting on this guy's grappling, his grappling's not bad. He knows how to do guillotine chokes. He goes for heel hooks on the ground. Go watch the Quarantillo fight. He drops Billy Q in a 3rd round after having his back taken in the first 2 rounds and gets dropped in the first round. So people who are shitting on this guy's durability, I feel like it's too much. Like, Billy Q put it on him in the first 2 rounds, knocks him down the 3rd round, and literally gets finished from punches to the back of the head. He never gets knocked out in that fight. So, and Jim Miller is not a guy to go out there and open mat wrestle you at all. He's just going to try to strike you. He's going to want to grapple, but please, Jim Miller, if you want to wrestle Gabriel Benitez, please do it. I want Jim Miller to wrestle the whole first round, because if he wrestles in the first round, I'm slamming Benitez on the live in the second round. Because you're going to get a very good number on him, and Jim will tire. That's what he did in the Vince Pichel fight. Go watch the Vince Pichel fight. He wrestled and he got tired, and Pichel was able to pour it on him. So I just feel like this is a good spot for Benitez, man. I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on his skill. I feel like people are just being like, oh, well, he gets knocked out 3 times in the first round. His durability is shit. I don't think it's shit. I know his last 2 wins are over Charlie Oliveros and Justin James, who both really suck, and those were given spots to him. But I feel like this is a good spot for him, and especially now at plus 130, like, I'm probably just going to have to double down because my read is Benitez, and I like him in this fight. But Jim Miller's going to get his legs obliterated here. Go watch the Hernandez fight. None of these guys in his last 5 opponents are really kicking the legs of Jim Miller like Benitez lives. AKA has, obviously, they say in every fight, he has the hardest leg kicks in the gym. Luke Rockhold's there, if you guys didn't know as well. I didn't know Luke Rockhold was at AKA at all and then had harder leg kicks. So, yeah, I really like Benitez here. Guys, I got him at minus 105. He's plus 130 now. I think it's a very good line on him. I honestly think, like, Benitez can cruise to a decision here. I'm actually picking Benitez to win by decision, and you can get Benitez by decision at plus 500 on DraftKings.
Fair play, my man. So coming in with the take on Gabriel Benitez, and, you know, Benitez is a guy that's burnt me in the past, right? I did bet him against David Onama. I thought he was the more skilled guy in that fight. You know, we've seen Onama kind of make mistakes in the past. regionally. You know, he kind of fights close with some guys, but he's always bailed himself out with athleticism and being really tough and really wanting to win. And at the UFC level, that doesn't always work. But honestly, it worked against Benitez there once again, right? Like Benitez was landing some good shots to your point. He went out there, he put on an honest scrap, and Onama was just more durable, was able to take the shots better, and was able to eventually put him down there. But Onama, tough guy, had some mixed results in the UFC, but certainly more good than bad, you know, and some things where he's building and looking to move in the right direction after, you know, leaving the crouch gym. So we wish him all the best, right? But I think of a guy like Gabriel Benitez as maybe, you know, not on the track for the UFC to be like a top guy, right? Like, I don't think he's ever going to be a top 15 fighter. I don't think that he's like a guy that's destined for great things, but I have a couple, I'm of two minds on this fight, right? Like 90% of Tapology voters are on Jim Miller for this spot, right? Which is always something that will give me like, you know, huge pause before I'm going to bet on something. I said, when I looked at like, my first look, right? I just said like, I was surprised to see Jim Miller as an underdog in this spot because I understand the public psychology as well. Like the public's going to bet Jim Miller. So I was just like, man, I'm surprised to see Jim Miller as an underdog in this spot. And then now the line is flipped, right? It's flipped since that video came out, however long ago that was. And I've been thinking to myself, like, if the number was reflecting what the public sentiment was, I feel like Jim Miller would be minus 250 in this spot. Like that's almost what I expected to see. And would that be correct? Like, no, I don't think that's right. You can't make 40-year-olds in this division minus 200 or whatever, but just like public perception, that's what I was expecting the market to reflect here. And so when I'm looking at the line, I'm saying to myself, okay, like, is this the setup everybody thinks it is? Like, oh, Jim Miller, let's get him on UFC 300. Let's get him an easy win against the guy who's been knocked out, to your point. Or conversely, right? Is this the sinister UFC businessman sitting behind the desk with the fat cat smoking cigars and saying, Jim Miller keeps asking to be on UFC 300, right? Even I watched that interview that he did today where he said, you know, the only thing I want is for Bruce Buffer to introduce me, and pardon my language here, folks, as Jim fucking Miller, right? And I don't always curse on the show. I try and keep it within bounds, but I also say what's on my heart. But Jim effing Miller, to shout out my guy Cole, who actually put that in the chat before. When I'm looking at that, I'm saying to myself, Jim effing Miller. What does he think he's going to be on the pay-per-view portion of the event, right? Like where you can swear and just say whatever the fuck you want. Like, no, like Jim is not going to be that. He might be the first fight on the card if he's on UFC 300. That's kind of the way that it is, right? He's at the tail end of his career. He's not in a very marketable position right now, a little bit older, a little bit longer in the tooth. Do they have 15 more fights to promote with the guy? The answer is no. So I do wonder to myself, you know, as a sinister back, you know, just terrible thought, but it's the way I think about this game is what is the business interest of the company right now? And sadly, I worry that the business interest here is like, who's a guy that we could get that looks like a soft enough name on paper, but like he could really go out there and fuck this guy up and keep him off UFC 300. And like, that's not the nice, polite way to put it, but that's just the way it is, right? Like if they're looking for, hey, is there a guy that we could sell as like, hey, this guy sucks, right? He's going to go out there and do the job to Jim. And then Jim just gets fucking flatlined in 10 seconds. And it's like, wow, this guy was 5 years younger and he's been fighting tough guys and he's been fighting top guys. And I do think that that's a possible path here. So I understand the love for Gabriel Benitez. I understand that play. And for me, I don't ever want to walk with the 90%. But I also think that the converse narrative here is like, this is an easy win for Jim Miller. Get him on UFC 300, sign him up before that fight, you know, because when you talk about lifetime achievement awards in MMA, they're few and far between. Guys that have earned them, Jim Miller. It's like there's very few, and he's kind of one of them. So that's for me the thing that I always like to check every box. And I can make a narrative case for both guys here. I can make a technique case for both guys, in my opinion. I think Jim Miller, for the first 5 minutes of a fight, is like a very dangerous lightweight, period, point blank, right? Like one of the only guys to submit Oliveira, a guy that's just, you know, lights out with a guillotine, he latches it on, fights over more often than not. But we've also seen he could be put in awkward spots. He could be submitted, right? He could be hurt. He could be cracked. He could be rocked on the feet. So it just screams volatility to me one way or the other. Kind of like the under here. If I was to play anything, you know, just like I see Jim Miller as a guy that more often than not, he's going to get his best work done in the first 7.5 minutes, or things could go sideways, right? But a lot of the times where Jim Miller has these fights that stall out, they're wrestling and grappling positions. And it's a guy that's kind of content to hang out there. Joe Selecki, right, comes to mind. But that's not really what you get with Gabriel Benitez. Like, he's just a blood and guts banger who wants to kill you, and he's willing to submit you, but he's trying to hurt you the whole time. So I agree with you, man. I think that this is a violent ass fight, and I don't know that it's as simple as everybody's making it out to be, but I also think hard for me to go against Jim Miller, Northeast guy, love him. And
so do I, man. I'm
trained with my coach as well. So got a ton of love for Jim Miller, but I could see it going either way here for sure. And I do know some sharp guys like yourself on the Benitez side. So taking that very seriously here. Good shit, my man. But with that being said, we can move along to this next fight here, where we've got Matheus Nicolau taking on Manel Kape Starboy. And I tweeted it out earlier. I said, what is this man's ceiling in the division? Is this a guy who's destined to win the championship in Manel Kape? And I've seen it on the Twitter streets, right? People taking Manel Kape futures to be the world champion. I can't say I hate that, right? I think that makes sense. If he wins here, he's probably positioned to get the next title opportunity. So that's one of the most important considerations looking at that futures market. Who's actually going to fight for the belt this year? Important question to ask and answer. And I think that Manel Kape has a lot of the things that you want to see in a champion. That's what I also put in that tweet, which is he's got some marketability, right? The company seems to like the guy. He's willing to go out there and talk some shit, build a fight. Hey, I want to fight you. Hey, fight me. Don't be afraid. Like, does he say too many swear words? Yes. Does he get himself censored on the program? Yes. But is he compelling? Does he create interesting moments? Is he a talker in a division that could really use one? Yeah. All those boxes he checks for me. And does he have the skills to pay the bills? I think he does too. When you look at a guy like Manel Kape, I bet Matheus Nicolau last time that they fought. And that was plus 105, plus 110. I forget what it was, but it was a very short underdog price. And to be honest with you, man, I felt very fortunate to cash that bet. I felt like it was a close fight. I felt like could have went either way. And to get the plus money, I'm always happy to be on the plus money side in a close split decision. If the fight plays out exactly the same, people are going to be very happy to have plus 190 on Matheus Nicolau. But I also feel, and I've made this point before, I could be dead wrong, but I said I think I'm seeing a different guy now. Manel Kape goes from having 0 knockdowns in his first 2 UFC fights to 5 in his next 4 UFC fights. The guy is just finding his power now. He's starting to set his feet better inside the octagon. Went from wearing shoes, fighting in a ring, to fighting barefoot in a cage. It's just a different situation. And he's doing it against Pantoja. He's doing it against Nicolau. He's doing it against guys in the top 10. It's not an easy welcome to the UFC. They thought very highly of him. They're like, this guy's going to be a world champion. Get him in there with the toughest guys. Okay, he fell short of the expectations, the very lofty expectations. Let's build him up slower. Let's get him some gradual steps up in competition. Now he's comfortable. He's got some momentum. Let's get him a rematch with a guy that he lost to before. And now this guy just got a brutal reminder that, hey, I could be knocked out in the first round, right? Because that's happened to him before. Now it happened to him again. It happened to him pre-UFC. His chin's not that good. And Matheus Nicolau, he's big, he's long, he's not that strong. He's kind of technical. He's awkward, he's funky. But we've seen a couple other guys overpower him and put him in some awkward spots. And I think that Manel Kape is the stronger guy. I think he's awkward to get underneath, right? He's got a low center of gravity, not easy to shoot on guys like that, especially now when he could sprawl a little bit better, when he's getting better with that front headlock game, when he's getting more aggressive with the arm locks in the front headlock series. I just think that Manel Kape has kind of closed the gap on some of the grappling deficiencies that he had when he got to the UFC. I think the comfortability level has increased. I think the momentum is firmly on his side. But the other thing, and I'll leave you with this, is that I have some CLV to report, right? I don't always get the best of it on the numbers because sometimes I wait for more information. But on totals, to your point from before, you got the plus 125. It's now minus 225. I mean, that's exceptional closing line value. But I just look at, all right, I got an opener of plus 145 to the under 2.5 rounds in a division where over 50% of the fights are ending inside the distance, where you've got Manel Kape, who fought to a decision with this guy last time, but it's not minus 300 to go the distance, right? They're recognizing, hey, there's finishing equity here. There was 2 submission attempts in the last fight. This guy's been knocked out again since that fight took place. I think there's a lot to suggest that these guys could get finished in a loss. So when I'm looking at the under 2.5 rounds here, plus 145. That was what I took in the early market here. And I just thought that was a good spot. It's now like, plus 105, plus 110, minus 105 in some spots. And I think that this is a interesting matchup, right? I think Nikolas could win this fight if he mixes in the grappling, if he gets on top, if he leverages that skill set. But I think if it's a fight that plays out on the feet, I prefer Cap. I prefer his explosivity. I prefer his ability to close the show. And I think that he's got a little bit more of the style and the showmanship to sway rounds if it is close. So that's kind of the way I feel about this one. How do you feel, brother?
Yeah, I'm on Cop by KO. I got it at plus 210. So I only have 0.70 units, I think, to win back 1.5. I just think Cop's going to knock him out, man. Like, Nikolas, like, literally, as Sweet D is saying, like, Nikolas doesn't really have a good chin. He kind of survived with his life, man, in that fight. Like, he was backing up that whole third round and was getting cracked. And we know what Manel Cop coming into the UFC, what he struggled with was volume. And now, honestly, when you look at his last four fights, actually, he's just put it all together now, man. Like, I think, like, Nikolas fights very low volume, too. He doesn't really fight with pressure. And I like the under. I like the under, but, like, I don't really think, like, I thought Manel Cop was going to get finished. Honestly, it was that last fight against Dos Santos because, Dos Santos throws so much more volume, and Nikolas just doesn't throw volume to me. But I also had Cop inside the distance last fight. I had the under 2.5, and I got burned on him. But here, it's like Dos Santos, I feel like Dos Santos' chin is definitely way better than Nikolas. And kid's younger, too, and he has less fights on his schedule as well. And didn't really eat damage prior to that fight. And he was fighting on a lot of fucking adrenaline in that fight as well. So I just feel like this is the big, like, do it, die for Cop. He knows that he comes in here and he puts on a performance and he starts as this guy that he's next in line for the title. And he is going to be because he fought Pantoja very close back 3 years ago. So whoever's holding that UFC future bet plus 1,400 on that Cop ticket, I know Clint is. I think that's a very great number. I even think plus 800 is a great number as well. I think Cop's going to put a performance on here and knock out Nikolas. I don't know what round it's going to be, but he puts it in the second and third round. I feel like he's just going to break this guy, man, find his chin, maybe even knock him out to the body as well.
Absolutely love it, my man. I will just say, though, I think that the one thing that I thought was mispriced about this as well could be the fight to end by submission. I do think that Cop by knockout is like probably the most likely outcome in the fight, like of any outcome here, just because I think last time out, to your point, Nikolas, pretty lucky to escape not getting knocked out there. But when you look at Manel Cop, he's a guy that's been getting more aggressive with his submission attempts, right? He almost destroyed the shoulder of David Dvorak, basically turned him into a one-arm fighter. I forget who said that, but shout out to them. I've listened to like 50 breakdowns here. So with that being said, my man's got to get out of here. So give us your thoughts on the main event, anything that you got here, and please let the people know as well where they can find you. We really appreciate your time and all your thoughts today, man. I thought you killed it.
Thank you, Liam. I don't really have anything for the main event. I don't have a bet. I'm picking Ankalaev to win, but from a betting perspective, I kind of like the over 1.5. It's minus 160. And Johnny Walker said in the interview, he's going to be more technical. He's going to be more calculated, and then he's going to pick his moments in this fight. And Johnny Walker did a pretty good job in the last fight with the leg kicks. It was giving Ankalaev a problem again. He still hasn't learned how to check damn leg kicks yet because he's so wide and all he wants to do is box tight with you. And if Johnny Walker could skirt the outside, he can make it look close. It's just the chin that gives me a problem and the craziness of Johnny Walker. But on a betting perspective, I like the over 1.5. I'm picking Ankalaev to win. But thank you, Liam, for having me on the show, man. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all of you that always show me support. You guys can find me on MMA_PropAholic on Twitter. I have my Discord linked in my Twitter bio as well. And you guys can find me on YouTube at MMA PropAholic as well. And I'm going to be doing YouTube shorts, actually, 1-minute clips on all my bets that I have, just small little breakdowns for my bets that I got this weekend. And Liam, thank you for having me on, man. It was a pleasure. It's an honor doing a show with you, man. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate you. Thank you, everyone who watched and shows us support as well. And let's have a great weekend, guys. Let's crush it. And Saturday as well, if you guys are going to be watching Saturday, I'll be on DFS by the Numbers Best Bet show as well. So you guys can catch me there on Saturday as well. And thank you, Liam, once again. Really appreciate you, man. Hope you kill it this weekend, and hope we all kill it this weekend, man. First fight night of 2024. Let's go, guys. Don't blow all your money.
Let's get this dub. Absolutely, my man. Have a great dinner. Thanks so much for pulling up. We really appreciate it. And best of luck on all your action this week, my man. Great stuff.
Thank you, Liam.
You got it, boss. And with that being said, guys, I will close out the breakdowns here for everybody. So I'll give you my closing thoughts here on that co-main event. And then I'll give you my thoughts on the main event here. But I knew that my man had a prior commitment, so I wanted to make sure he had an opportunity to just get it, whatever he had on the main event off his chest before we got things rolling. So now, without further ado, back to what I was saying about the submission prop here. And I'm thinking to myself, the fight ends by sub could be slightly mispriced for Cap and Nikolas. And the reason being, Nikolas last time out attempted 2 submissions. Those are the only submission attempts, I believe, that Cap has been forced to defend so far in his UFC run. Similarly, when you look, Manel Cap attempted his first 2 submission attempts in the UFC in 2022. So I think 2 guys that are improving with their grappling. And when you have a guy like Nikolas who's been knocked out on a number of occasions, you would think he's going to come out here and try and wrestle, try and grapple, try and get this fight to the ground. So when I'm looking at that kind of setup, I just say to myself, man, a flyweight matchup where flyweights end by sub at over 20%, I believe, off the top of my head, it's like, pricing that at plus 750, 650, whatever it is, just seems a little bit wide to me, given some of the stylistic dynamics. But with that being said, guys, long show. Hope it's been a very good show. Hope you guys have enjoyed. We've got the main event to break down. It's a rematch. So without further ado, let's break it down, guys. We've got light heavyweights here. Magomed Ankalaev taking on Johnny Walker. And the last time that these guys fought, it was Magomed Ankalaev, also a big favorite going into that one. And I think that Magomed Ankalaev is the more proven, more talented guy. But let's talk about the division itself. Light heavyweights, very violent, very aggressive, a lot of volatility inherent to this division. And Johnny Walker is that kind of guy. He's gone out there and beaten guys that, probably have better skills on paper than him before because he's been wild, he's been aggressive, he's gone for the knockout. What's changed is he's been fighting out of SBG Ireland, and he seems to have taken a much more conservative approach. We've seen him go out there and point strike with these guys for 25 minutes. That's a completely different guy. We saw against Jamal Hill, he tried to get aggressive again, did not pay off, right? It ended up being the ticket to his demise in that spot. So I'm thinking to myself, this is a very volatile fight. And you've got one guy in Johnny Walker who invites a lot of that volatility, right? I think he's got a bad chin for a heavyweight. I think he's been cracked, hurt a number of times, rocked, wobbled. But I also think that Johnny Walker has explosive power. He's not a complete fish in the grappling. He has some idea of how to grapple. And I also think that Magomed Ankalaev doesn't typically attempt a lot of submissions. But when you're seeing a guy coming off a disqualification, possibility, maybe he's not going to be as aggressive throwing strikes on the ground with Johnny Walker. Maybe he's going to look instead to try and look for his first career submission, try and get on top of this guy, grab a hold of something and rip it off, grab a choke. Because I do think Magomed Ankalaev has shown good wrestling, good fundamental grappling. He just hasn't shown that willingness to look for submissions in the UFC, 0 submission attempts. And his only loss in the UFC was via submission. It was to Paul Craig. He was on top for most of the fight, but he got complacent. He got a little lazy on top. He ended up tapping to that submission. So I think that this is a spot where, you've got 2 pretty solid fighters, but one of them is a lot more clean and technical in the Magomed Ankalaev side. He's a lot less, basically Johnny Walker has to fight perfect fights to win because he's a lot more likely to just get clipped and then not be able to recover. We've seen Magomed Ankalaev have some sketchy moments, get hurt, get touched on the chin, but we've also seen he's able to deal with that, come back out, win a round after he's lost a round, get a takedown after he's gotten hurt. These kind of things that I think are really important. So Ankalaev should have more margin for error here. I think he should have more paths to victory. And I think that Sweet D is onto something here with potentially Ankalaev by sub. I also think that when you look at Johnny Walker and try and identify paths to victory, I think Johnny Walker via sub is like one of his best paths to victory, right? He's got long limbs. He's awkward. Ankalaev maybe looking to wrestle, take him down. And this is a guy that's training with a black belt in Ireland, that's looking out for trying to get him a little bit better on the ground. And we saw he flustered Nikita Krylov. He gave him some awkward moments on the ground. And Johnny Walker looked terrible at that time, but he's been working on his ground game a lot since then. And when you have really long limbs and when you've got a guy like Ankalaev who's made a boneheaded mistake before and cost himself an easy win, I do think that is something at least interesting to take into mind here. And to his point, Sweet D says Ankalaev by sub plus 1050. The ends by sub is like plus 650 again in this fight. So it kind of accounts for both guys. And I think that Johnny Walker, he's got some knockout equity, but I don't see him having a ton of decision equity here. He does have the low kicks. He can skirt to the outside, kind of keep it competitive that way. But I just think that the better head strikes will normally come from Ankalaev in a spot like this. We've seen Ankalaev in the past do a good job of winning rounds against somebody like Blachowicz over 5 rounds. And I do think Blachowicz is a superior fighter, in terms of his overall skills. So this is interesting, though, because we got Mark saying Walker plus 400. What the F? Late Christmas gift. I do think it's too wide inherently from a money line standpoint for a light heavyweight fight. A lot of people are like, oh, Ankalaev at any price. That's just not the way I play this game, right? I always like to say, I want to see a guy that's going to limit risk. We know Ankalaev won't even commit to wrestling and taking people down at all times. Sometimes he goes out there and is willing to exchange on the feet, trade some shots. And I think that that's something that's mildly concerning for me. Mr. D also making a good point. The fact they gave Anka no contest when it should have been a DQ shows me who they want to win. Fair enough point, but that is also a function of the State Athletic Commission rather than the UFC's decision themselves. Diamond says Ankalaev is retiring soon. Not a solid guy. Fair play there. So I think overall, my write-up is probably going to end up picking Ankalaev here, but not with a lot of conviction. I'm going to do a little bit more tape study tonight before I write my article. So, stay tuned for that. But for me, I just look at this fight and say to myself, I expect Ankalaev should be able to get the takedowns here more often than not if he wants them, because Walker's so tall, long, and awkward. And we saw last time out, he can get clipped, he can get hurt. And he could get backed up in this fight. So in the small cage with a guy with some takedown upside, Ankalaev should win here. But in this division, knowing what I know, I'm not laying minus 550 on a guy like Ankalaev, who seems to just be cursed, right? He can't get a clean win in his most recent UFC performances. Something's always going wrong. It's a no contest here. It's a draw there. It's a foul here. It's a close decision there. Just a lot of things that would put me off of betting somebody at a huge chalk price. So if you guys have any last questions, go ahead and fire them off right now in the chat, because we are about to close up shop here on the night. I appreciate everybody for taking the time to rock with us. Bets and Banter is back in your life. We're going to have a first look at the next UFC card coming up very shortly. So make sure you're subscribed if you're not already, because you're going to want to see that when we come out with that. So if you guys have any further questions, comments, concerns that we did not get to on the show today, no problem. Go ahead and drop those in the comment section below, and I will try to answer as many as possible before fight time. Thank you all for the support. God bless each and every one of you guys. Good luck with all your bets for this first card back, and come back next week. We're having all the same fun again. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.